have a question for you guys, okay? Heading into the 2022 NFL season, Justin Fields going into his second year, what is considered a successful season for him, right? So what is considered a successful season for Justin Fields? Let's talk about that. What is going on, y'all? Faiz Sports All back at it with another video talking some NFL here to talk about the Chicago Bears. So if you're a Bears fan, hit the big red subscribe button, people. Down below, make sure to follow me on all my social media platforms, guys. As always, hit the bell icon so you're notified every time I drop a new video. All right, so you heard the question. Now let's talk about it, okay? For Justin Fields, what is considered a successful season, okay? And to me, thinking about this question long and hard, as much as I don't want it to be the case, it is the case, which is, to me, it's more about the numbers than it is about the wins. Because here's the fact of the matter, folks. The Chicago Bears roster isn't very good. We know that. We don't need to belabor that point. They're not expected to be very good. And so, to me, I can't judge Fields' season based off of the Bears' win total, right? If they win a lot or if they lose a lot. I can't do it. Now, if they do win, that's great. But what if Justin Fields puts up ridiculous numbers and the Bears barely win any games, right? 4 or 5 games. So, to me, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to, me personally, focus a little bit more on the numbers and see how they stack up at the end of the season before I take a look at the wins in order to consider if the season was successful or not. Okay? That's what I'm going to do. So, if we're talking about the numbers, we're talking about the stats, what are the numbers that I need to see from Fields to know that it was a successful season for him? We're not even talking about elite, like crazy. We're just talking about successful. Like he developed and got a little bit better. Let's talk about touchdowns. Folks, Justin Fields had 7 TDs last year, all right? At the bare minimum, we need him to throw more touchdowns than interceptions. He had 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That can't happen again. Obvious. So he obviously needs to improve on that TD to INT ratio, but I'm literally talking about it should be at least a 2-to-1 ratio. 20 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, right? That's the 2-to-1 ratio I'm looking at. 20 touchdowns should be the minimum. I want at least 20, and I'm talking passing touchdowns. Yes, Justin Fields could score rushing touchdowns as well, but I'm specifically talking about passing because to me, Justin Fields is not Lamar Jackson where he's a better runner than he's a passer. I still think he's a better passer than he is a runner. He's a passer who can run. Need at least 20 touchdowns, preferably more. I'm going to go ahead and say this. 20 TDs and let's say 10 interceptions is considered an okay type of season. But if he got, let's say, 25 and 10, now we're talking about a successful season. So that's kind of the range I'm looking at here. 20 TDs at least. Obviously, TD to INT ratio 2-to-1. 25 touchdowns would be that successful range, okay? That's passing TDs. And look, folks, I know we're talking about one stat here, but you take a look at the guys with the top passing TDs. I mean, they're all elite quarterbacks for a reason, right? Last year, Tom Brady led the league with 43. Then we had Stafford with 41, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, like Josh Allen. I'm sorry. This is a very good indicative of the elite quarterbacks, like the number of passing touchdowns you throw. Even if they are garbage touchdowns, right? Which some people will make that argument. What if he throws a bunch of garbage touchdowns, Faiz? Well, I mean, looking at the top guys who threw touchdowns, I will take these guys, right? Even if they're throwing garbage touchdowns. All right. Number 1, passing TDs. Number 2, yards. We know the Bears have never had a guy throw for more than 4,000 yards in a single season, a quarterback. And, I'd love for Justin Fields to do that. That would be fantastic. But that's a little too high in terms of the barometer we're talking about. For a successful season, we need at least 3,000 yards, preferably up to 3,500. 3,500 yards would be the successful. 3,000 yards is kind of the minimum I'm looking at here. And that shouldn't be too hard. I mean, we've seen Mitchell Trubisky do this, right? Mitchell Trubisky actually had 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions and had 3,500 passing yards in his best season with the Bears, right? So those numbers were all done by Trubisky. Justin Fields can for sure do it too, okay? So I don't think that's anything crazy. Next up, completion percentage. Justin Fields last year had a 59% completion percentage. Oh, by the way, I missed on his yards. He only threw 1,800 yards last year. Completion percentage, he had 59%. Not good enough. Got to be above the 60s. I'm saying preferably 63 to 66%. That's kind of the sweet spot. We see the solid to elite quarterbacks in. You need to be a guy that throws a lot of efficient passes, and that is shown by the completion percentage. So I need 63 to 66%. Let's be on the higher end, Justin, if you can. And finally, I know a lot of people aren't a fan of this, but I still like passer rating. And so for me, Justin Fields, should have a passer rating. It's a large range here, and I'll break it down for you guys. Somewhere between 80 to 94. That's considered a solid to elite quarterback's passer rating. And it should be at least, for a successful, solid season, 85 to 87, right? If it's above 90, that'd be great. That's obviously successful. But somewhere around there, if it's 80, that's the bare minimum. Again, I gave you the bare minimum for all these numbers, and I'm giving you the successful season for all these numbers. So that's what we need from Justin, okay? I could have talked about QBR as well. He had the worst QBR in football last year, but I'm going to stick with passer rating, and that's what I want from Justin. So just to recap, right, we're talking about at least 20 touchdowns, preferably to have a successful season, 25 passing TDs, or close to it. We're talking about 3,000 yards passing at least, 3,500 passing yards preferable, at least a range of 63 to 66% completion percentage, finishing somewhere around those numbers, and then minimum 80 passer rating up until, right, preferably 85 to 87, 88 passer rating for Justin Fields. So I believe if Fields hits those numbers that I just listed out to you guys, that's a successful season. That's basically 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 3,500 passing yards, 65 completion percentage, and an 88 pass rating. Like, that's a very solid season. And I don't think it's crazy to expect that for Justin going into year two, because of the fact that, he's going to have that growth and stuff. And I know I've said before that, technically this could be his year one because of the new regime. But if we're just talking about the addition by subtraction of no Matt Nagy, and if we're talking about a scheme with Luke Getsy that is centered around Fields and his strengths and him being on the move a lot, I see him hitting the completion percentage fairly easily, because I think he's going to get a lot of easy design passes to his receivers based off of the offense. I can see the yards coming fairly easily as well. I don't think that's a big number. Where really we're talking about are the two things that are going to be hard or semi-difficult for Fields are going to be the touchdowns, the passing touchdowns, because sometimes guys can just drop it. The defense obviously can just make some ridiculous catches in terms of the DBs. It could be fluky things like that. And then, of course, passer rating as well. That's something that's dependent on a lot of factors, not just passing touchdowns. So that is what I believe Justin Fields needs to have a successful season in the eyes of Bears fans and the media and everyone else overall, right? It's one thing to say just Bears fans, but I want the entire media to know that Justin Fields had a successful season, that he is the quarterback of the future for the Bears, and he is on the right track. And this is what he would need to do to achieve that. So let me know what you guys think about that. Leave a comment down below as always. Thanks for watching.